everything you need to know about delt training. So a lot of people oversimplify delt training and they're thinking that some form of overhead press, lateral raise, rear delt, that's going to be all bases covered. However, the delts are a much more complex muscle group than most people think. There are actually 7 heads to your deltoids, and they're responsible for a wide arc or range of movement patterns all the way from this all through this range of movements. If we were just picking an isolation lift, shoulder extension to finish, okay? So we basically need to be hitting at some point pretty much all of those movement patterns or working the shoulder through that range at some point across a macro cycle in order to maximally develop your delts. Now, a lot of people put way too much volume towards their anterior delt training, things like shoulder presses, and this does tend to be the movement that you can progress with load the most. However, it's very rarely the anterior delts that are lagging in someone's physique, okay? Usually, the lateral delts and rear delts are the things that could deal with a lot more volume and would benefit for your physique aesthetically a lot more, okay? Your anterior delts are absolutely hammered with all of your chest pressing work, so very rarely do they actually need that much isolation work, and a front raise probably isn't that useful by itself, okay? You're already hitting those anterior delts very, very hard. Now, because your lateral raise and your rear delt patterns are biomechanically tending to be quite weak movements, you will often find that you will need to rotate those movements a little bit more regularly than the muscle groups where your average movement is a lot more biomechanically strong. So you're pressing, you're rowing, that type of thing. Okay, so you probably need more lateral delt and rear delt variations across a macro cycle than you do with a lot of other muscle groups. Finally, we want to try and pick movements for our lateral and rear delts that challenge the muscles in their length and range. If we're using conventional dumbbell raises, for instance, for lateral delts, rear delts, we only ever get tension in that shortened and weakest range, whereas there is now more and more research coming out that is that lengthened stretch position that's going to give you the most muscle growth. So we want to either be using cables, with that cable set up at approximately wrist height at the start of the rep, so that we've got significant tension in our lateral delts at the start of that repetition, or we want to be trying to use some kind of setup leaning against the bench so that, again, we've got more tension in that length and range, but we definitely don't want to be missing out on that lengthened portion of the repetition.